Hi everyone, thanks for attending. I appreciate that you've come, especially as I know that it's lovely weather outside for an open-top bus parade. And also all you United fans, especially for coming rather than enjoying the lovely weather. Who here is, before we go any further, has anyone actually here heard of Splunk? No, right, it's the most dodgiest name ever, especially for us Brits. So it's an American company. It's actually named after the American term for cave diving, which is spelunking. But that doesn't mean that us in the UK can't have fun with it. We have quite a lot of fun, especially down in London, which is where one of their main offices are. So a little bit about me. So I'm a solutions architect for a outsourcing firm called Converging Data. We're mainly based in Leeds, but we travel all over. And before that, I was a developer for 8 years. So I've moved over to Converging Data 3-4 months ago, actually after I volunteered to do the talk here. And I've worked for Capita in financial services areas. I've been for Cox Automotive, which is mainly around car auctions, based up in Leeds. And in that role especially, went from developer up to team leader, up to managing a team that were responsible for the whole integration layer within the business. And we did some quite interesting and innovative things, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So as part of that role there, I went over to Splunk to work on our Splunk product that we had there, mainly because there wasn't anyone else that knew exactly how to use it, and recently became certified admin. But I've done all this within less than a year. I actually started using Splunk in the end of June last year, where I went to an event in London which is free called Splunk Live. So there you give them the morning is basically a sales pitch, and the afternoon is the useful stuff that tells you, right, okay, this is how you go and use it, this is how you get data in, this is the kind of stuff that you expect to get out of the back of it, and came back with loads and loads of different ideas of how we could implement it in our place. And one of the main things that I've gone and used Splunk for is to learn new programming languages, to make my code a lot better. I am by no means the best coder. In fact, I would definitely rank myself one of the bottom ones when it comes to code. But since I actually started using Splunk properly, how I would use it on my own machine, monitoring my own code, I had hardly any problems with bugs, releasing code with any issues. Certainly just simple, stupid stuff, which is the stuff I always fail at. If I tend to look at developing, especially when I'm being given a deadline, is I'll go and type something up. It looks right from happy path, right, release it through, and the testers go, what on earth have you given me? This doesn't work at all. Since I started using Splunk, again, that's something that started getting better. So I mentioned that I work for Converging Data. These are some of the companies that we work for. We've got most of our team actually embedded within NHS Digital at the moment, doing a massive transformation project for them. We typically specialise in installing Splunk and providing professional services on behalf of Splunk at some really big places. Qantas, NHS Digital, it's the standard slide with all the logos that we've gone and worked for. And why would they use Splunk? A lot of these companies find themselves drowning in data, hence the corny picture and the corny slide. I apologise. But they typically will use it to log, to manage their data that's running through their organisation, manage their login that comes from their applications. The data can be structured, it can be unstructured, it comes from a load of different sources. It's not just one application, it's lots of them, and it typically will bring all the data and all the logs into one central place, allowing you one central bit, one place to go and query all that information. It becomes quite powerful. And there are other tools out there that can do that. I know one of the last times that I was actually here with this user group, we saw log analytics, was it, with Azure, and how that works. And it's very, very similar. There are other tools out there that can do this. One of the main advantages, though, with using Splunk, and it is for developers, certainly if you're running local, it's totally free to use. The schema is very, very unstructured. Typically, two things. One, it's got to be human readable. Two, there has to be a timestamp in there, because time's one of the most important things when you query your data within Splunk. You kind of need to know what time that was generated. But as you can see from all these different lines, it doesn't really matter what format your date is, where your date is. So you've got the first line here where it's just a standard ISO date format. This one's got milliseconds on the end. The data, you've got hello world, you've got a 1, doesn't matter. This one here is a little bit of JSON. You've got the data followed by your timestamp. Really doesn't matter how the data comes in, what format it is. You can do it in XML, you could do it in your own quirky little way. Really, as long as you can get it in and you're happy with how it's coming in, you can understand how that data is. That's the only thing that's of any importance. So, as for the demo, what I want to do is I want to show you a program that I wrote last month, and this program I actually wrote to get data from my smart home into Splunk, so that I could. The reason behind doing so was that I had we were getting our energy bills. I was having a look at our energy usage, and it was way above what it should have been. And we've got lots of IoT devices in the house so that actually monitor what's going on, your Philips Hue lights, smart things, all that kind of thing. So I wrote a program to get as much of that, as many of those devices in as I possibly could, and see what was going on, why things were on at a specific time. If any of you have got these kind of platforms, they're brilliant, unless you want to know what's going on, in which case it can be a bit of a pain to find out what's going on, especially at 3 in the morning. So this is my data within Splunk. This is just one run of that program to pull data in, and this ran at 17:54 on, sorry, no, that was me running the search. It ran on the 2nd of April at 15:58. That's when it finished. We can see straight away just from the summary that we've got 1,367 lines from that one run. And any one of you that's that's worked in any sort of organisation with rather large programs that are doing an awful lot of things, if someone says to you, right, okay, we've got a problem with this particular program, I'm sure that we've all been there and we've gone, oh, not that one. Finding a problem in it is like a needle in a haystack, especially if the log line's not saying something along the lines of, oh, big fat error, yeah, here's where it's gone and exploded. If you've got, say, too many loops, it's gone in a bit of a death loop but handling itself, kind of. All those kind of things becomes very, very difficult, especially when you've got that amount of lines. So in this particular instance, the main problem is the fact that it seems to be taking too long. So if you were looking at that from a pure text level, 1,300 lines, that could, and this is just one run. You'll have the same log file. It will have been running all day, adding, if this runs every minute, then you've got 1,367 lines potentially every single minute. Again, it becomes very, very difficult. And most text editors are just going to go, no, I don't want it, I'm not interested. Or you'll end up spending an hour waiting for it to load. So you can throw that information into Splunk, and literally all I've gone and done here is I've just queried for a specific event ID. I found one before I came here and just went, right, okay, I just want to find out what was going on with that run. But in essence, it's just no more difficult than just specifying which ID you want. And you can see each is the different log line, and what I'm querying is just purely the event ID and what it is there. So Splunk will have automatically gone and picked that out and gone, right, okay, I can pretty much work out exactly what it is that you're sending through to me, and come up with some field names, which I can show right there in terms of it specifies them as interesting fields. So without me doing any specific work, any fancy work, anything along those lines, straight away it's giving me some date and time metrics, and it's giving me things such as what my record types could be, what messages are actually coming through. So we've got start, handling response, param 200, we've got start of loop, we've got storing message, random messages that kind of mean nothing as you just look at it from a list. But as you actually start reading through your program and what's going on, they're the kind of things that you would just, if you were developing, certainly in debug mode, you would just go, right, okay, type in this particular point, I'm going to just put message 1, message 2, message 3, and then as you run your program in isolation, you'll see, right, okay, 1, 2, 3, bang, right, it went explode at that point. So then you can go, right, okay, and find out where it is. This is just a little bit more on top of that, but this is just me adding it in. You can literally just go 1, 2, 3, step through, whatever it is that you want to add in there. it will go and you can put that into Splunk. So from a very basic point of view, just with this data right here, I can do stats counts and just confirm that there are 1,367 messages just purely by doing a stats count and finding that. One thing that I can also do is I can run something called a transaction and then find out exactly how long that took to do. How long did that run take? If I can type properly. So what it actually goes and does, there is a specific command, but I don't use it off the top of my head. I can just add those two together and know it's around 68 seconds. I can go through the help documentation and find that out, but you get very, very bored very, very quickly if I start messing through the documentation, reading up on stuff like that. But quite simply, that's what I can tell. And then what I can actually do is I can go and add that into a dashboard and merge those two bits of information together. So I can call this demo Sheffield, right? Add that into a dashboard, and then I can do the count. So in fact, find method. So I can find out all the different procedures that were actually called. So if you've got specific loops within your procedures, you know how many times a procedure should typically be called, then this again is going to tell you that straight away. And I can add that to the exact same dashboard that I just created, so demo Sheffield, and then view it, and I get straight away those two bits of information side by side, and I can call that at any one point. Those searches will always be there for me. And then what you can do is you can actually go and do more queries, more searches along those lines, and eventually what you'll do is you'll come up with a dashboard that looks a little bit like this. This is exactly the same bit of information, it's just a few more queries. I actually did the thing, actually did it right there, see 68 seconds. So it's exactly the same event ID. I know that it took 68 seconds, and you can specify colours within the panels as well. So 0 to 30 seconds is green, 30 to 60 is orange, and over 60 is red. Confirmation there, we've got 1,367 messages, and then we've got a time chart showing how many messages for every single second were actually being output. So you can see typically it's 20, there's seconds where it's 30, and you can click on those and it'll give you more information, those specific log lines that were output at that point in time. And then you've got a breakdown by message type, so you can see in this case it was just, it ran, there were no errors. You can see it was just debug and info. And if I highlight certainly over debug, you'll see there's 1,365 debug messages. And all you need to do if you're outputting your debug messages, you've got a program that's doing that, and you don't want to query a debug, then you can quite easily just within your search just specify that you don't want debug. So, and that will then hide that. If you're specifically interested in errors, you can just search for errors. It's very, very easy just to specify what it is that you're interested in. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll just add that in. Equals info. I just want to see the info ones. And you can see they're my two info lines, purely just a start and end. There was nothing else in between. Everything else was debug, but it's as simple as that in terms of just specifying what it is that you want to see, what it is you don't want to see. Straight away, I've just excluded all those debug messages that I wasn't interested in. And then in my case, I like to try and have some sort of incrementer within my loops and output that. The amount of times that I've been stung by programs falling into the death loop is quite a lot. So therefore, what I try and do, certainly as I start a loop, is I just try and add a log line that says, right, I'm starting my loop, and what increment within that loop it actually is. And it means that I can then produce a table which is similar to this. So I've got my procedures, I've got get device, process device, and store message. and then I've got a minimum, an average and a max count of all those different loops. So I believe this was over 100 loops that it did in total, but I can see that which procedures were actually hit and how many times messages were output within those loops. I know then, for instance, if process device, if that is the standard, it's five log lines within that specific loop. If it's more than that, then I know that I'm looking at a death loop. And if you're then looking at trying to make your programs more performant, to reduce the time that your programs are taking to process all that information to do what it is that you want to do, then straight away that's a great indicator to say, well, hang on a minute, if you're running a loop and you're doing that 100 times and each one is logging 5 times, each one's got at least 5 logs, there's a lot going on within that. Can you refine that? Can you make that better? And then as you actually go and drill down, I've got 2 different classes that I'm typically calling. In this case, it's get smart things and it's store the device message, and how many log lines are within there. Again, if you're trying to make your programs more performant, that gives you an idea of some of the things that you might want to look at. And then everyone's favorite at the bottom, which is the fancy Sankey diagram. So what this is actually showing is what the root, basically what main block is, or whatever you're calling main block, the main procedure that goes and handles everything. In this case, it's get device. And if I highlight over that, I can see there's 136 invocations of that. And where they're actually going to is process device and call API. So I'm actually calling the call API procedure once, and I'm calling the process device procedure 136 times. And then if I go over to process device, it'll then break that down again and say, well, hang on a minute, you called this procedure this many times, so call API this amount of times, search JSON this amount of times, store message this amount of times. Search JSON and store message, they didn't do anything else, they just purely did something and they came back out of it. But call API, that, as the name suggests, called an API, and we've got a procedure to actually check the response and handle that response, and how many times was that called, and it tells me, right, that's how many times that was called. And if you've got specific procedures to actually handle the exceptions and things like that, then it will also go and log that out as well. Typically, another thing I try and do with my log messages is when I'm calling a procedure that I know is relatively fundamental, I'll go and say, right, okay, this procedure is now calling this procedure. So I always know I can produce graphs like that. This took a minute to actually visualize. Literally all it is just a count by procedure name, that is it, and you just visualize that. You just select the visual that you're interested in. Once you know, Splunk's one of those tools. It's quite easy to pick up. It's quite quick to pick up, and when you have picked it up, it's great to be able to use and show fancy little diagrams such as that. And that from a pure dashboard perspective of just monitoring one particular run of my code, that is all that there is to it in terms of how much information you can get just through one run. And I guess what is also kind of appropriate is to show you that, as I said at the beginning, this is a program that was designed to produce data and to gather data from the Smart Things API and pull it into Splunk. And what I actually did with that data when I did pull it into Splunk was produce this dashboard, which was also on the 2nd of April, and this gives everyone an idea of what was going on in my house on the 2nd of April. So what the light levels were, can see straight away it's telling me information such as my lights are on all the time, so it's not actually analysing. I've not got anything to say. It's quite obvious. I've just got at what time? 7 o'clock in the morning, all my lights turn on, and then nothing is there to say, right, okay, switch the lights off until it gets to 9:30 at night when it dims them. But I can see what the average light level was outside, so that's something I might want to look into as a way of trying to actually save a little bit of energy, just purely by going, well, hang on a minute, you're capturing the outside light levels, can you do something there? I've also got occupancy rates, and I can see that no one was in between 8:30 and 11 o'clock. Even though no one was in, the lights were on. So again, that's something else that gives me an idea of something to have a look at. What the average light level was. These are figures right at the top are just giving me indications of what it was at the end of the day. This one here saved me £300 a year. It was my kitchen underfloor heating thermostat, which, despite the fact that I told it to only turn on for 3 hours a day, was very clearly not on for just 3 hours a day. It was on the entire day, and that was basically that was the reason that I went and splunked my house. It was purely to find out what was going on, why I was using as much energy as I was using. Well, bingo, there you go, there's where my problem was. And then I've got this, they call it a Trellis diagram right at the bottom, and it's basically just showing what all my lights that were on and what what motion was actually detected. And again, it'll tell me which motion sensors aren't running, aren't working properly, which ones, which rooms do I really need to look at as a way of actually handling whether my lights are on or not. And it's just something fancy, just something a little bit daft and quirky to find out what was going on, but it saved me quite a bit of money just by doing this, and it didn't take particularly long to do. The script to call the API to store in the JSON, it's just a bog standard Python script. You could write it in any language that you want, and certainly as far as Splunk goes, it doesn't care what the source is, which language you've gone and written your program in. You could write it in some language that you invented sometime when you were at university, whatever. Doesn't matter, as long as it is human readable and it's got a timestamp on it, it really doesn't matter where it comes from. And from a dashboard perspective, that is pretty much it. So some of the successes that I've actually gone and had within the year of using Splunk. So this is mainly at my previous employment. So I mentioned that I ran the team that was responsible for the whole integration layer within our applications. Typically, that's 50 different programs that were between 30 and 50 different programs that were running. We were at the point where we decided, right, we're going to have a look at reducing our errors. We just released a £6 million project that was falling out all over the place. And because we're the team that's based right in the middle with no expertise outside our team, we were the ones that being asked, right, okay, where is the problems coming from? Where is the problem here? Where's the problem there? Which meant that my team could not do anything apart from firefight all the time, and nobody enjoys firefighting. So we had relatively decent naming conventions, especially when it came to producing our logs. So I just took a step back, went, well, I'm not technically useful in any particular capacity apart from Splunk. So created a few dashboards, and all it was just literally, right, here's our search through our applications for the word error, and which applications had the most amount of errors. And then from there, you could quite easily identify, just through looking through the logs, right, it's this program, it's this procedure, straight away. And you would find, and what we didn't expect to find was that there was around 17,000 errors a day. That the application with the most amount of errors only output something like 5,000. So normally you would expect to find with a large amount of errors, it's just one or two programs that are causing it. And as soon as you fix the problems with those, then the rest go and fall suit. Unfortunately not the case here. However, just quickly through that simple query of application, index equals mule, type of log type equals error, straight away we went and identified the top 10 biggest offenders and how we were going to resolve those. We ended up doing 30 to 40 releases within August, when a lot of people are on holiday anyway. And bearing in mind that this isn't an organisation that's very good at DevOps. There's no CI/CD. Everything is very manual. To get the slightest change in takes like 3-4 weeks. So for our team to get 30 to 40 implementations within 1 month was a fairly big thing. Certainly there was a lot of noise about it, and the amount of release managers that came to me and going, what on earth are you doing, was quite an entertaining thing. But at the end of that, we started the month 17,000 errors a day. We finished the month 300 to 400 errors a day. And all of a sudden, all the noise stopped. All the support teams coming to us going, it's your fault, you're the guys in the middle, tell us where the problems were. Well, they also had access to these visuals. There's no reason to hide the information from them. And straight away it would tell them, everything is fine on our side, you probably need to look at the guys that just built that new fancy system that's falling down all over the place. Or actually, it's this system that was built a year ago that's just been subtly erroring out all the time, that no one's really bothered to actually look at the tech debt for, as to why there's errors there in the first place. It was always, we're the guys in the middle, we're the ones that will go and solve the problems. That all stopped. Productivity of our team as a result of that just went absolutely through the roof, to the point where the devs within the team are now going down to London to do user group talks of their own, actually explaining all the prototyping that they've gone and done. And I ended up leaving them a lot more happier as a result. And the other thing as well that it went and did especially for a Cox Automotive. It's an automotive company. We had typically a lot of the data that comes in has got a registration plate somewhere along the lines. So I just did a simple dashboard, kind of like what you've gone and seen, but you could enter in a registration plate. And it literally would just look through your log lines and go, right, okay, if this registration number that you've gone and entered is within there, I'm going to show you the information from it. Straight away, if someone would come to us and say, this vehicle's not appearing on the website, this vehicle's not appearing on a customer's feed, this vehicle's not appearing on the auction for today, you could just query that registration. And usually when people would come with those kind of problems, it would install fear in everyone, going, oh no, it's the network guy's problem, it's the network guy's fault, it's the .NET team's fault, it's the Java team's fault, it's anyone's fault but the team who it will sit with normally. Because no one could prove, no one could say, right, this is where the problem was, and you would end up spending 2-3 days actually trying to find where the problem was, at which case the customer is no longer interested in the car. This simple dashboard, just to enter in a registration plate, look through all your log lines and say, right, okay, these are all the touch points. It hit this customer feed, it hit here, it hit there, it might have only gone and hit 3 or 4 different places. It might have been something that has gone through a complete death loop and gone through many, many different areas because there's a genuine problem with the system. But we could identify that with a quick search, which would typically take about 10 seconds to run. And within about a minute's worth of analysis, you would straight away know exactly where the problem was. Saved so many people, so many days worth of investigation, and everyone was quite happy as a result. But there's some of the quick wins that we went and had as a result of installing Splunk, really, certainly as far as my experience so far goes. And if you've not been bored to tears with my presentation or anything along those lines, and are quite interested in learning more about Splunk, then here are some of the things that you can do. This is all totally free. We've got a Yorkshire user group which is in Leeds next week, which everyone is more than welcome to come to. It's something that I'm actually just starting up as a thing. And because we're mainly based in Leeds, it will probably be in Leeds above the station. But if there's enough demand, then we can certainly look towards incorporating it elsewhere. Our company, Converging Data, we run something called Splunk for Rookies. Now this is sponsored, this is run alongside Splunk. Splunk do the same in London. We do it up in Leeds, and it's basically like kind of a crash course. It's free to come to. What you'll do is you'll get some access combined logs, just some web logs, and you'll produce a dashboard showing transactions of your website, where the failures were, where the locations of where your transactions were. And it'll show you that on a chloropleith map in terms of how many people bought goods from this particular website in America, in England, which state in America, just to kind of give you a flavour for all that kind of stuff. And that's entirely free. It's a couple of hours. Everyone's welcome to attend. And if there's enough demand, if there's a specific company, or if there's enough demand as a collective to run one in Sheffield, then we're very, very interested. We're quite happy to come and bring one down here as well. There's no problem with that. I myself am actually just based up in Catcliffe, so I have the joys of a train journey up to Leeds every single day because I'm fed up with the M1 and it's just rubbish. So other things that are available that are totally free. There's a Splunk Fundamentals course which you can sign up for. It's just an instructor on demand. Unlike most online courses that you go and sign up for, it's not totally sales pitchy, and you won't feel as though you're bored to tears and want to hide in a cupboard at the end of it. If nothing else, you can always laugh at the instructors' t-shirts. If you've been to any of these kind of DevOps type exhibitions anywhere, and Splunk have attended, typically what you'll find is they're the guys with the quirky t-shirts. Take the SH out of IT is kind of the usual thing. When they started up, they actually developed the product in a bar, and what they used to have as a slogan was Splunk is a greater than drunk. But they say they get a little bit more mature, but I disagree entirely with that one. And I mentioned that I started my life with Splunk by going to somewhere called Splunk Live, which is in London. So it's every year. It's totally free to go to. This year it's on June the 13th. And they're doing something the day before as well, but it is completely free to go to, and I really, really recommend, certainly if your organisations are already using Splunk, you want to get to know Splunk a little bit more, it's 100% worthwhile just going down. decided that it would be worthwhile. It may be worthwhile taking the 6 o'clock train in the morning and something like the 11 o'clock train back at night just to save a few quid. And it was a painfully long day, but do you know what? It was actually really worth it. And other places where you can get information, well, I'm on LinkedIn. Give us a shout on there. I put a few articles on there. Certainly, a lot of all this that I've gone and learned is throughout any formal training. Training costs a lot of money, and I wasn't in a position to be able to be put through it. So I learned a lot myself, and everything that I've gone and learned, where I've gone to, the user groups, Splunk for Rookies, all that kind of stuff, I wrote in a specific article, which is on my LinkedIn page, which is open for all to view. And if you want, you can just give us a shout, and I'll point you to exactly where it is. And the last one is have a play. Go on Splunk.com, download it. It is free. It's free to use. You get 90 days of like the enterprise trial. After that, it's free. You get a free version of the product, which comes with some limitations as products like this do. But typically, for developers, from the purpose that I've presented to you today, there is no reason that the free product won't be able to do any of that. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Is there any questions? Everyone awake? Thank you very much.